Donald Trump stood in front of a microphone day after day and told us exactly what he is.
I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Serious? Not even coming up.
Somebody's coming up. Somebody's serious. Somebody's coming up. Somebody's serious. Somebody's coming up.
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien here. Thanks for stopping by. So, here we are, 2 weeks since the re-election of unsentenced, convicted felon Donald Trump as President of the United States. I've gotten a lot of responses from Trump supporters here, and I have so many thoughts of my own that I honestly don't know where to start. And I don't know where to stop. There's so much going on that if I don't have a set topic list, I could ramble on for a long time. So, for this video, I'm going to try and focus on responding to a claim that has come up specifically a number of times recently and reflects a general vibe from my detractors. That vibe is reflected in this comment here. We will accept your apology in 4 years. Everything you claim he will do won't happen. Everything that I claim Trump will do will not happen. Now, let me be the first to say, I hope you are right. Because if you are wrong, and just a few of the things that I'm concerned about with Trump and his incoming administration come to pass, we are in for a world of hurt. And I want it to go on record here because I want it to be known what my concerns are, clearly stated, so that if they come to pass or do not come to pass because Trump doesn't try to do it, we can reference my stated concerns. Now, some of you might be bothered by the caveat I just added to this, the because Trump doesn't try to do it part. But I don't think Trump should get credit for failing to do something heinous. For example, if I was to claim, which I do not, that Trump was going to outlaw women wearing pants, and you folks said I was overreacting, if Trump then signed an executive order outlawing women wearing pants and SCOTUS immediately shot it down as being unconstitutional, he doesn't get credit for it not happening. Right? He would have tried what I said he would try. Get it? Okay. So, what are my concerns about Trump and his presidency? This is not a comprehensive list because I can't think of them all right now, and I reserve the right to add to this list, but I cannot subtract. I'm concerned that he will weaponize the DOJ and go after his political opponents. Now, I know many of you think Biden was using the DOJ against his political enemies, but the problem with that theory is that nearly all the prosecutions were outside of the DOJ. Merrick Garland was a near spineless do-nothing, and all those prosecuted were very blatantly committing crimes. So, my concern is that Trump will act on his political persecution and prosecution promises. Media outlets that criticize him being targeted. That would be broadcast outlets like CBS for running a critical 60 Minutes piece, or an online outlet for publishing information leaked from a government source. Individual citizens or organizations who speak out online or organize protests being targeted for investigation, needlessly being questioned by federal authorities, having travel restrictions put on them, or IRS audits, things like that. Or something as simple as Trump and or his spokespeople publicly stoking animosity toward individuals and thus putting them at risk from the unstable freak squad he knows follows his every word. If none of that happens, I will gladly admit I am wrong. Screenshot and timestamp this. But the question is, if some of this does happen, will you be fine with it? Will you make excuses for it? I already know that some of you will be fine with it because you've already proclaimed that I should be arrested and silenced, that this channel should be reported for promoting hate, proving my point that some of you voted for Trump because you want these things I'm concerned about to happen. I'm concerned that Trump will pursue an inhumane immigration policy. There's no mechanism in our system to implement the mass deportations Trump promised would begin on day one of his administration. There's also no price tag, and no one even asked how much this action would potentially cost or the impact it might have. We cannot just grab people and drop them on the other side of the border, so some system of detaining all of the people swept up will have to be developed. Where will all these supposed millions of people be held? We don't have room in our prisons and jails, so new holding facilities will have to be made. Now, I made mention of internment camps in a comment, and someone said, absolutely no one wants internment camps, Jerry. You're overreacting. But if we end up building a whole bunch of temporary facilities to hold all these allegedly illegal immigrants, how are they not internment camps? And yes, I say allegedly because they have to have their status assessed. Don't they? So my fear is that we will have these facilities filled with immigrants. Yes, some of them will be bad people, the worst of the worst. And you know what? Good riddance. But the vast majority of them will be fathers and mothers and children and whole families who we encouraged to come here because we want cheap food and corporations want cheap labor. Some of them will be Haitian immigrants who are here legally because they were fleeing a country that is dangerous to them. But because Republicans have threatened to take that legal status away because they don't like that they were allowed in. So these perfectly legal immigrants may be declared illegal and placed in inhumane conditions because they fled a country with inhumane conditions. And, you know, that's tragic, but as Rudy Giuliani said, you shouldn't have been let out of the jungle in the first place, so you gotta go. That's my concern. And my concern is that more of my tax dollars are going to go to the private prison industry to build these internment camps. And yeah, damn it, I'm going to call them internment camps. George Zoley, founder of Geo Group, the country's largest private prison operator, told investors just after the election that Trump's deportation plans represent a, quote, potential sea change for the industry. Quote, the Geo Group was built for this unique moment in our history and the opportunities that it will bring. Well, fuck me if corporations aren't constantly finding ways of making money off the backs of immigrants in this country. How much do we want to bet that the Trumps have some money invested in private prisons? Anyway. So, if Trump does not try and implement mass deportations, then I will admit I'm wrong. If Trump executes mass deportations, but somehow it is orderly and an orderly, humane process that does not separate families and does not disrupt communities, then I will admit I am wrong. Oh, and if Trump's rhetoric about these policies does not cause an increase in hateful violence and false accusations toward people of color in this country, I will happily admit I am wrong. But again, if any of this does happen, are you going to be okay with it? Are you going to make excuses for it? Oh, and first they're going to give you excuses if things go the way I think they will. Because at first, they're going to tell you, they're going to tell us that they are only going after the worst of the worst. They will make a big deal out of that. And many on the left will protest and yell because they don't trust the administration. And Trump's people are going to say, look at the crazy Democrats defending these horrible criminals. They love the criminals. And so maybe the left backs off a little bit. And as more and more innocent people get swept into this system, people will stop listening to the protests. That's just how we treat immigrants now. That's my concern. And don't come to me like some in the comments already have, asking, well, what would you do, Jerry? It's too late to try to get my input. I told you what I would do, not vote for the person who's going to implement those policies. It's on you now. And on the back of immigration, I have to talk about the economy because, well, much of our economy is on the backs of immigrants, but I'll get to that shortly. If Trump implements tariffs the way he says he's going to, it's going to send inflation through the roof. You thought the post-COVID economy was bad? Wait for this. Tariffs don't punish countries. Tariffs punish consumers. Now, ostensibly, they're meant to punish companies. But companies just pass the pain over to the consumers. If there's a 20% tariff on something they bring in, they're just going to add to the price. Simple as that. Now, it's always possible Trump is just lying. It is, after all, his most honed skill set. So he could be lying about putting these in place, and that would be great as far as I'm concerned. But that's not what you voted for him to do. So if he does implement these massive tariffs he promised, and inflation is fine, I will admit I am wrong. Happily. But tariffs are not the only thing that affects prices. Some of our food is imported, like seasonal fruits and vegetables, and tariffs would make those more expensive. But homegrown food, a lot of that relies on immigrant labor. We like cheap fruit and vegetables. We like cheap eggs. And the big reason we are able to have these is because companies employ a lot of undocumented immigrants and pay them very little. But if mass deportations happen, well, that's going to affect the labor force something fierce. Now, American citizens can step in and do the work. Don't let people tell you that these immigrants are doing jobs Americans won't do. That's not true. They just work for a wage that an American would never stand for, under conditions Americans would never tolerate. So if Americans have to step in and do that work, prices are going to go up. But of course, it's possible Trump will say, well, the people who are picking our food are fine to stay for now. But what does that say about your side and the law is the law, you have to do it right stance? So, adding to the list, if Trump's mass deportation policy somehow does not negatively affect the economy without inflation, I will admit I'm wrong. But so very many of you claimed that inflation was so bad under Biden that you couldn't survive more of it. If you get more of it under Trump, are you just going to hand wave it away? Blame someone else for it? Inflation is down now. It has been for a while, and prices are fairly stable. If inflation comes back, will you admit you were wrong about Trump and the economy? And lastly, and I only say lastly because I don't want this video to be too long, and I have so many more concerns about Trump. Lastly, I am concerned about the fate of Ukraine and the Palestinian people. Trump says he can solve the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours, a claim I only see possible if Trump cuts Ukraine off entirely and helps Putin get everything he wants. I'm also concerned that Trump administration will let the Israeli government pretty much wipe out the Palestinian people. Naming Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel is not a good sign for the Palestinians. Huckabee once said, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. And there are certain words I refuse to use. There's no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they are cities. There's no such thing as an occupation. The only occupiers were the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Turks, the Brits, the Romans. They were occupiers. The Jews are the occupants. Huckabee is a Christian Zionist who thinks a single state of Israel has to exist in order for Jesus to return, and of course, then all of the non-Christians will be destroyed. But, okay, now that I've mentioned Huckabee, I guess I was lying about that being the last topic, because I have to mention my concerns about the utter clown car of picks that Trump has floated for his administration. Where do I start? How about with the least horrible? Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. I'm not going to say he's not qualified on paper, but he is a spineless coward who can't give strong feedback to Trump and would fold like a teenage gymnast to someone like Putin. Tom Homan is qualified to be border czar, since there are no standards to qualify, but given his role in family separation in the first Trump administration, I don't think he'll bring a humane approach to immigration policy. Stephen Miller is a revenge-fueled troll and known racist, and Deputy Chief of Staff is a little too close to the ear of the president for me. Tulsi Gabbard is known for amplifying conspiracy theories and Russian propaganda. Russian state TV loves her. And having her as Director of National Intelligence is probably the second biggest security risk next to Trump himself. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a promoter of pseudoscience whose anti-vaccine rhetoric is directly responsible for the deaths of dozens during a measles outbreak in Samoa in 2019, is a disastrous pick for Health and Human Services. Though I think he makes some good points about big ag and big pharma, those are far outweighed by his vaccine stances that will get people killed, and if implemented, will affect a generation of children. Fox News host Pete Hegseth has been proposed for Secretary of Defense. Though Hegseth served in the military, he has absolutely zero leadership experience and is not qualified for the job. Understand that the current Defense Secretary, Lloyd James Austin III, served 41 years in uniform, retiring as a 4-star Army general after 3 years as commander of the U.S. Central Command. But because he was black, he was called a DEI hire. Hegseth was an Army major and spends his time on Fox News shit-talking female soldiers being in battle and defending soldiers who commit war crimes. Oh, and he paid off a woman whom he allegedly raped in 2017 so he could keep his job at Fox. And last of the freak show, Matt Gaetz. Well, what a difference a day or two makes. When I recorded this on Wednesday, this was a section where I talked about the heinous choice for Attorney General Matt Gaetz, a drug-popping teen sex criminal who practiced law for at most 3 years was. Trump, who claims to only pick the best people, apparently had picked the wholly unqualified dirtbag because he showed a willingness to attack Trump's enemies with impunity. A man who stepped down from Congress in an attempt to keep the scathing ethics report on him from being released. But the stench on him was so bad even Trump could smell it. Well, he couldn't smell it. He still supports him to this day, but it was so bad that Trump couldn't ignore it. The question is, how much of this is a lack of judgment on Trump's part, and how much of it is a desire to surround himself with people who have already shown a disrespect for the law? If Congress were run by normal people, I'd not worry about most of these people getting confirmed. But apparently, Trump is skipping background checks and is telling Republicans in Congress to take a long break in the new year so he can put all these people through recess appointments and not bother with confirmation hearings. Sounds pretty authoritarian to me. Seriously, if the new Senate Majority Leader bows to Trump's request and puts the Senate into recess so that Trump can appoint his administration without being vetted, without having to answer any questions, are you going to be okay with that? What if Biden had done that? Are you going to be fine with the president being surrounded by people wholly beholden to him because he knows things about them that the rest of us weren't allowed to see. So instead of these agencies being independent, they are effectively controlled by him. I think far too many of you are going to be okay with that. Far too many of you are fine with Trump being given the power of a king. I know some of those around Trump are absolutely fine with it, as both J.D. Vance and Steve Bannon have praised the work of Curtis Yarvin. You know, the guy who came up with this concept you people call red-pilled. Yarvin has blatantly stated, and I quote, "If Americans want to change their government, they're going to have to get over their dictator phobia." And I believe for the last decade or so, the right wing of this country has been working toward that goal, getting people in this country to get over their dictator phobia. But hey, many of you have told me that I'm wrong. I'm overreacting. This is all a figment of my TDS, and time will prove it. I honestly hope you are right. Because if you're right, we're going to be okay. Everything's going to be great. This video is a record of my statement. Download a copy for your vault. Hold me to my words. But if I'm right, where will you stand? Will you honestly assess that you were wrong? Publicly admit and stand with me? Or will you have to come to terms with that being the outcome you wanted? That authoritarianism is exactly what you want. I want to close with this. In my post-election video, I refer to myself as the enemy within, Trump's term for pretty much anyone he wants to scapegoat for America's problems, and that was a mistake on my part. Some people commented that just saying that might make me a target. Some people said that I absolutely should be targeted. Whatever. If someone as small as I am is getting in trouble for speaking out, then we have a much bigger problem on our hands. No, it was a mistake for me to say that because I had forgotten one of the biggest rules when it comes to Trump's behavior. Every accusation is an admission. In making so much of his campaign up in the final days about pointing fingers at the enemy within, Trump has told the entire world exactly who he is and what he plans to do. Donald Trump stood in front of a microphone day after day and told us exactly what he is. Donald Trump is the enemy within. Me? Well, I'm Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien, and proudly, in the words of John Lewis, I'm getting in good trouble.
And the Shogun is the master. Why don't you sit down and shut up? Why don't I sit down and what? I said, why don't you sit down and shut up? Why don't anybody who wants me to sit down and shut up come down here and make me?
I can't hear you.